Okay, welcome everybody to the March 2026 California 4-Wheel Drive Association Access and Stewardship Meeting. Tonight we are talking about all things West Mojave, or WeMo, as we are looking at the pending imminent closure of 2,200 miles of routes covering 1 million acres of BLM land in the Southern California Mojave Desert region. This is a vast closure that impacts so many different sectors of not only the OHV community, but also just communities around that footprint and all uses, recreational and otherwise, that enjoy the West Mojave region. So, since we have a lot of familiarity among the group that's here tonight with the background, I'm not going to at this time share maps and data about what the closure consists of, as I think that we have that under our belt. But if anybody would like to talk about that in more detail, bring it up in questions, and I can also connect with you outside of this meeting to share more of those details and talk through it together. But the main purpose, the legal purpose behind this closure is a court ruling that was made by Judge Ilsen in Northern California that is tied to a case that goes back several years, relating specifically to the desert tortoise conservation and allegations that during travel management planning, the Bureau of Land Management did not effectively or adequately account for protections that are needed for the desert tortoise as it is an endangered species, and relied too heavily on deferred actions, deferred mitigation, and other measures that were not concrete enough in the judge's view to effectively protect the desert tortoise. And so our travel management plan that was approved in 2019 has been remanded through this court order, and 2,200 miles of routes that fall within designated critical habitat for the desert tortoise have been closed. They're officially closed as of now, since that court order was released on January 23rd, but they're effectively not closed quite yet, as we're expecting sometime in the month of March, which we're in, for those closures to begin rolling out. So we'll probably, as of now, begin seeing the effects of that closure with changes in signage, perhaps fencing, blocked entry points to routes, or other physical and visual indicators to note that the routes are closed. So we'll spend some time getting into all the details about the closure and the routes themselves. Since this is tied directly to the desert tortoise, though, I wanted to start off our meeting with some of our valued expertise in desert tortoise conservation. And tonight we have Katie Shaw from the Living Desert Zoo with us. Katie is a longtime advocate and worker in efforts towards desert tortoise conservation, working with the Living Desert Zoo and I believe also other entities, in a way that crosses over through many of the communities that are collectively impacted through shared habitat with the desert tortoise. And we are one of those communities. And so Katie brings, I think, a really valuable perspective in that she deeply understands all the science behind desert tortoise conservation and what has led up to the need for endangered species listing. She's also actively engaged with the OHV community, as well as many other communities in the greater Mojave region in her advocacy and work. And so she brings a depth of expertise that I've really come to value. And I think that we have a lot to learn from her. She's joined us at King of the Hammers and a few other events. She's also joined other groups within the OHV advocacy community and has really helped to bridge some of those areas between recreational users and those who access public lands, and then the balance of conservation and multiple uses that we're all trying to achieve. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Katie. I know you have some key points to share, and then we may also have questions from the group. To pick your brain a little bit more about the desert tortoise, how this closure impacts us, and how we can all be supportive in our ongoing efforts to help conserve the desert tortoise while also hopefully enjoying recreation access to the beautiful deserts that we all treasure in the Mojave area.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. Thanks all for having me. I think I either know or have texted or emailed many of you at this point. But yeah, just to recap, I'm a conservation social scientist at the Living Desert, and we've been working on this project for a bit over 2 years now. It's a desert tortoise conservation project focused on education and voluntary behavior change. Um, I actually ha just had Dave Kusky stop by the zoo earlier today, so we've been chatting about this stuff. So my brain's been kind of steeped in it all afternoon. So, um, but yeah, just wanted to, I guess, uh, c continue some of the conversation that we've started, and keep those channels of communication open. As a social scientist, I work with people on all the different conservation projects that we do. And working with people is often complicated and messy, and these trail closures are no exception to that. And so, um, I don't know, I've been thinking of it as like shutting down all of the trails in these critical habitat units is operating from one extreme. And I think it's really hard to be productive or achieve progress when you're working in the extremes. Um, I think saying none of the trails should be closed is the other extreme, but I think it's not helpful to do a pendulum swing between two extremes. And so um, I think, it re it does not require this closure of eliminating every trail from the landscape, but there has been a study that looked at a trail density threshold above which desert tortoise populations have always been found to decline. Um, but I mean, again, there's middle ground there, and I think just as connectivity is important for the desert tortoise population and their genetics, it's also important for off-roaders. Um, and I know that we're all here because we love the desert, and we need the desert tortoise to help keep it as a functioning, healthy ecosystem. And so, um, yeah, I've had some really great conversations with folks about how we can all work together to achieve this. This past weekend, I was at a race through one of the clubs with District 37. They ended up finding a tortoise on one of the tracks. And so they actually ended up going back out and rerouting the track a bit and tasked someone as like a desert tortoise monitor. And I just thought it was a really great example of how, we could work together to kind of achieve both off-roaders getting to recreate and enjoy the desert um, and working towards desert tortoise conservation as well. Um, I also just want to keep the discussion going about how like thinking of desert tortoise conservation as a bigger picture is complex itself. There's no one single factor that is entirely responsible for the decline in desert tortoise populations, and I think trying to like point fingers like that also isn't very productive or useful. And so for the folks that are irresponsibly riding OHVs, that's but one piece in a complicated puzzle. We've got climate change. We've got the overpredation from an oversized raven population, habitat loss from various forms of development, disease, right? So there's a lot of different factors to consider here. And I think, as Dave and I were discussing earlier, there's a lot of room for just letting folks know about these different issues. For some of those issues, there's some really easy things that people can do while recreating to help protect the desert tortoise. And so the goal of our project has really been sharing that messaging with folks, and trying to find a way to achieve this balance that I think we really all want to see. So if it's useful, I'm happy to go through the talking points that we usually try and share, the calls to action that we give folks. But I know several of you have heard it many times from me at this point, so I don't want to uh, force y'all to listen to it yet one more time. But But happy to have this as a discussion. If that's useful in terms of diving into the issue a little deeper, I can certainly share those points.
Katie, why don't you just really briefly hit on those key actions that we can take? I know that we do have many people here who have heard it, but we also have a few who I believe may not have. And so we don't have to spend an exhaustive time, but just maybe touch on those and then we can go into all the other discussion questions.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so one of the big things that we are kind of working against with desert tortoise conservation is this oversized raven population. And so one of the reason we have an oversized raven population is from all of the food, water, roosting sites that they get from people in the desert. And so we're trying to let people know about the importance of responsible waste management, food storage, just decreasing that access to food for ravens that's allowed their population to explode and continue growing. The raven's the top predator of the desert tortoise and can peck through their shells until they're about 5. And so we're only seeing about a 2% juvenile survival rate because we've got at least 1,000% more ravens than we should have naturally in the deserts. Um, and again, this isn't pointing fingers at any one group. We also work with restaurants and food-related businesses as part of this project to get them to hopefully join us in this responsible waste management as well. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of messaging, just letting folks know about the connection between um, access to food, the oversized raven population, and the decline it's causing in the desert tortoise population, especially since it's not like a super intuitive connection. Um, Another key point is just working with folks to share the importance of staying on trail. We found talking to folks and in some school presentations that we've done that I think from like a well-meaning place, there's a lot of people that think to help the desert tortoise, they need to like put out food or water for it. But I mean, this is an animal that's been living in the desert for millions of years and is very adapted. And so just trying to reinforce that as long as we keep the desert healthy, we keep native plants that they need to survive. We don't need to provide any food or water or anything. Doing our part is just kind of keeping that healthy ecosystem. And to add to the list of things that are a challenge for the desert tortoise, invasive plants are a big problem. And so sharing knowledge about which plants are native, which plants are invasive, that's also helpful. Um, Also want to share with folks about not touching tortoises unless like absolutely necessary. If it's right in the middle of a trail and in imminent danger, of course, please move it off to the side. If you do need to move it off to the side, move it, let the tortoise know you're there so that you don't scare it. And move it low to the ground, move slowly. But the whole point is that you don't scare the tortoise so that it voids its bladder because the tortoise saves up water that it needs to survive in its bladder. That's how it's adapted to this desert ecosystem. And so if it loses all of that water, it can threaten the tortoise's ability to survive. Um, but really just encouraging folks not to touch tortoises if at all possible, because there is a disease transmission that can happen. Yet another threat that the desert tortoise faces is that they can pick up an upper respiratory disease from us. So just trying to minimize that when at all possible. And then if you do need to move it, doing so in a way that will minimize any other issues with it. Um, those are, I think, the main points that we really try and get across with folks, just as kind of like achievable calls to action that people can pretty easily do. Right? We're not going to try and go out and be like, you need to go solve climate change because we're like, you know, that's not helpful for the conversation. But a couple key things about simple actions that people can do while recreating, while enjoying the desert, I think could really help us shift the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for sharing all of that. Um, I appreciate the balance that you've shared in regard to OHV role of impact as well as other roles of impact. And in a few minutes here, I'd like to share just a slide that provides a little bit more discussion on that topic. But before we shift in that direction, I want to see if there's questions or thoughts that folks in our group tonight may have to discuss with Katie in relationship to desert tortoise conservation.
I would like to ask, is there any estimate as to what the percentage is that the off-road community has contributed to the decline in the tortoise population?
I think it's really hard to break a an issue this complex down into like simple, like straightforward numbers like that.
Yeah,
A lot of the issues are interrelated in different ways. And so, like who's to say if someone off-roading left food out versus a local random person that was out versus a restaurant versus an ag farm that was a ways away that the raven flew in from, right? Like it's really hard to break stuff like that down. Um, and
I'm
yeah, I hope
thinking.
it just doesn't get used to like again, like I don't think pointing fingers at any one issue is going to
No,
solve.
I'm thinking more of the direct, I mean,
Hmm.
towards getting ran over or getting scared to the point where it loses bladder. I don't know. Is there some kind of measurement at all as to what impact that they are claiming that we're having on them?
Yeah, I don't think there's a number for that. I mean, I
Okay.
think direct impacts like that are probably not the biggest threat, like getting like,
Right. Of
hit.
course.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's also something where it would probably be nearly impossible to get any data on that, especially since it is a protected species and no one would want to report it or like, it's just like
Yeah.
that just becomes a whole messy thing. But
I can understand how the Ravens are a big problem. Are they the majority of the problem? Are they, anyway, that's fine.
yeah, I mean, without trying to assign any like specific numbers, I think the Ravens are a huge problem. Absolutely. And just working to spread awareness about that is a big part of what we're doing, what some of our colleagues are doing in other groups and agencies and organizations. There's been whole studies on raven density populations. So yeah, for sure, that is a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Actually, I
you.
think I will jump over to share a little bit of content because Katie, I hear where you're coming from, and I appreciate there's some delicate balance in regard to having these discussions and keeping our efforts focused on solutions versus finger pointing. I also appreciate that there is a lot of rhetoric in the public sphere and in public perception about desert tortoise mortality and decline. And that's part of what we need to address through how we're advocating for restoration of public access in this region. And so, without implicating you or Living Desert Zoo in anything, I do want to just share some research that I've been able to dig up. And I'm showing it tonight in rather simplistic form, um, but it is part of where we will be um, going towards in relationship to um, increasing awareness of the actual impacts on the desert tortoise and the relationship of OHV within that complexity of the equation. Like you were saying, Katie, there is quite a bit of complexity to it. However, I mean, desert tortoise has been researched now for several decades, many decades, and the scientific foundation of the case that was used for this ruling to close this 2,200-mile set of routes is based on some very old science that is not as robust or um, quite frankly, accurate as what has been available since additional comprehensive research has been conducted. So I don't want to knock the validity of research that was done initially. The great thing about science is that it is a continual path of investigation. And the real value of science is when we continue to question the hypotheses and the conclusions so that we're moving closer and closer towards accuracy. And so on the screen, just looking at an aggregate of many sources of studies from the biological community to the Marine Corps, to other social research that's been done in a context related to the Mojave Desert region. There are some trends that emerge, and that's what's shown here. And when you're looking at those trends, Dirk, to kind of call out your question, there I also can't find any exact percentages, but we consistently find this structure of ranking. And so without moving us towards anywhere where we're pointing fingers or trying to assign blame, just looking at the reality of the science that we have at hand today, raven predation is consistently called out and identified within studies as the top source of desert tortoise mortality and decline. They prey on the juveniles, and so it's like a double doozy where they're taking out a tortoise, but they're also taking out a tortoise as an infant per se, where it doesn't have an opportunity to mature into adulthood and propagate and bring us more tortoises. And so it's a double whammy where really there's been a huge effect on the population and number of tortoises within this region because of the growth in raven population. In one study that I found, and it's referenced in some other areas, it's estimated that the raven population in the West Mojave region has increased by 1,700% in the last 10 plus years. That's a huge growth. And like you said, Katie, there's a lot of different sources for how ravens are brought about to thrive and increase in that type of volume. And we don't want to be a part of that. So being very careful with our food waste and food management is quite critical and part of our own conservation ethics that we want to be practicing, not only in the Mojave and the desert, but everywhere that we ride. We do not want to be perpetuators of leaving food waste or any waste out on the trail. Our conservation ethics are always leave no trace, tread lightly, and I mean, at the bottom line, we want to leave things better than we found them. And that's the type of recreational ethic that we practice in Cal4, and I know across the communities of all the groups that we're partnering with. Disease is also a big one, as tortoises have had their habitat shrink from a number of reasons. Urban and industrial growth is one of those big reasons, but as their habitat has shrunk and also as they've come into contact with one another and with humans more frequently, then that has perpetuated the increase in their experience of disease, with respiratory illness being one of those, the primary one, the mycoplasma, and I'm going to forget how to say the word that is abbreviated with SPP, but the URTD, the respiratory illness is, it's been really challenging for desert tortoise ecology in the West Mojave region, as well as in other areas where desert tortoises have traditionally had their habitat. And then there's habitat loss and fragmentation. There's a lot of renewable energy development throughout the desert. So whenever we see solar farms, wind farms, and other industrial scale developments taking place, the footprint of all of those developments basically scrapes clean and wipes out the native vegetation and territory where desert tortoises once lived. It's known, and this is a fact, we know factually that 1 kilowatt of energy produced from a solar panel requires 10 acres, and 1 kilowatt of energy produced from a windmill requires 40 acres. So when you're putting up these utility scale renewable energy developments, which that's another element of balance. I know there's many advocates for renewable energy, but it takes a big footprint of land when you're putting them out on desert landscapes. That also has an impact on desert tortoise. So in regard to vehicle encounters, numbers 5 and 6 indicate where that trends. Again, I'm not trying to state hard facts or percentages, but where it trends across the research that's available today. They fall in about the 5 and 6 ranking, with street legal roads, paved roads being by far the more prominent place where desert tortoise strikes from vehicles occur. And so we don't want to be cognizant of that when we are traveling out to our recreational favorite places or our campgrounds, to our trailheads, etc. We are getting there on paved roads, and we want to be, conscientious and looking out for and stopping for caring for tortoises along our route, as well as when we're on designated routes um, outside of West Mojave now that we're not able to ride there until this court ruling is resolved. But in all the other areas where desert tortoises live and we do get to continue riding, we really want to be in heightened awareness of this species and be looking for them and be prepared to stop and care for them or not touch them in our care for them, as Kate mentioned, um, so that we're not contributing to any element of decline or mortality to the desert tortoise. So this has provided some clarity in regard to kind of that complexity of factors that impact the desert tortoise, but I don't want to, not mention it for the sake of not wanting to point fingers. Like I said, Kate, I'm not saying that towards you specifically. I understand that you're in a different position as a conservationist and a social scientist. And so from the OHV side, we are focusing on that as part of not the sole thing, but as part of our efforts towards bringing truth to light, bringing accuracy to light, being able to go about this in a science-based way. I know Cal4Wheel and all the organizations we're partnering with, we really rest centrifugally on the fact that we move based on science, we move based on facts rather than emotion or our own desires for what we would want to see opened and where we want to play in our beautiful public lands. We want to go about enjoying our use of public lands in a way that does achieve the multiple use standard and that does achieve balance of conservation with human use in all aspects. So that's a little bit of a long segue, but I thought that might be helpful for the conversation since I know we've had a lot of questions to that end. And that might help to just give some context as we continue. But I see, Chris, you had your hand up, and Mark, you did also. So, Chris, do you want to jump in?
Hey, Rose, thank you. I joined late. I joined the old meeting Zoom call, so I apologize if my question was already covered. Seeing OHV recreation as a direct mortality component to a protected species, that jumps right off the page. I'm curious of the numbers, the information behind those numbers. There's probably not very many self-reporting interactions that led to the species mortality. So where is that coming from? Is that seeing shells with MX or super swamper tread across them? How is that number quantified?
Well, I have not seen a number quantified, so I'm not going to venture to give that. What I was showing was where I'm seeing trends in a variety of studies in relationship to what are the top causes for desert tortoise mortality and decline. So, that's not a hard thing. I'm not trying to put that out there as like this is black and white facts. But that is a consistency in trends. And like Katie mentioned, I don't know that we have any research available that has dug into the actual numbers or the concrete percentages or dynamics of these various influences. These are the top known sources of desert decline and mortality. And so in relationship to this court ruling, I think it is very useful to call out and be aware of the fact that we see a much higher level, significantly, proportionally higher level of desert tortoise decline and mortality coming from ravens, disease, utility utility scale and industrial development across the desert landscape. That has nothing to do with motorized recreation or vehicle use whatsoever. So we'd like to dig into that further. I'd be happy to, as I'm going through my research, to share that with you directly, Chris. I think the more eyes that we have on this, the better. And the more perspectives people are coming from as we're digging into the science further, the more accurate that we all can be.
Yeah, I agree. The enumeration and without any other information suggesting that OHV recreation is the sixth largest contributor to the mortality, it may as well be fifth or seventh or number two. So I'd be very curious as to where the number is being derived from, and as well as the spreading of the sharing of that slide without the resource or the statistics to back it up. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, Chris. And like I said, I'm not trying to put this out there as hard science. I'm showing some trends from the research I've conducted. So anybody who wants to pick it apart, I welcome it. Let's dive in together. I'll share everything I found with you directly. And I hope that this helps to create a more robust conversation among all of those who are concerned with the closure of these routes and the conservation of the desert tortoise.
Indeed. Thank you, Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Mark.
Yeah, my questions have been mostly addressed already. I mean, if, of course, Cal4's mantra has always been leave no trace. And if we abide by that, we're not contributing to the raven population. And we just need to let the rest of the community that's not in the club know how important that is. The other aspect of that is in pursuing other issues like this, sometimes it's good to find out, well, yes, it is a cause, but what, in line with the other questions, what exactly is the quantity? And that's been asked already. And sometimes asking the investigator, in this case, Katie, have you actually ever seen a crushed shell on an OHV trail? Or the other researchers, have they actually found that? Or is it just a reasonable speculation that it would be found?
I mean, I haven't been driving out on a lot of the trails
Mhm.
to take a look myself. I had one man at an event tell me himself that he hit one, which was unfortunate
Right.
and not
Mhm.
great to hear. But I don't know. I think I fear the getting stuck on the ranking of the threats. Just kind of leads us into the weeds with this issue where um I don't for this, I don't know, does it matter that much if OHV mortality is fifth versus sixth? Whereas,
Mhm.
I mean, I think the point that, we could focus on is that we don't need OHV trails to be at zero, right? And so how do we find a balance where, okay, maybe we have to close a few, but like the study that I saw with the trail density, again, the number wasn't zero. We don't have to eliminate these trails and eliminate connectivity. And so I think just for um I don't know, kind of just moving forward with the issue, um, I don't know that getting hyper focused on like what ranking um the specific item is, or like sticking exact numbers to it is, as much as just like there's ways we can work together to like not have something in either extreme, you know? And I think that's really like I don't know, that's the conversation I would love to have going forward of like how can we work together on this?
Harry, you had a question?
Trying to unmute, sorry. I thought you did say me, correct?
Yes, yes, Jerry, jump
Okay,
in,
sorry.
please.
So as some of you know that I'm involved with Ecologic, and we hire David Hubbard, and some of the people on this group, in this group call, have been on the calls with David Hubbard. The gentleman, I didn't catch his name. I apologize because I'm new to this forum. That had asked for the numbers of the desert tortoise. So we had a call today with David, and David has found some biologists that kind of can confirm the reports of, that the desert raven is a predator and the overpopulation of the raven is an issue. There's also a fox in the desert that is also a contributor to uh, that's also a predator to the desert tortoise. So between those two, in this gentleman's report, the desert tortoise is not is not going to sustain life anyway, because there's 50% of the eggs don't make it to be hatched, and then between those two predators, life just can't be sustained. Then you add in the upper respiratory illness as well, and that's a big problem. So David's really not going to focus so much on the numbers. I don't believe. I mean, maybe that if that becomes an issue, I can ask David if there's a way that we can kind of clarify that. But David has a very good understanding of how he's going to go. We in Ecologic, the board of Ecologic, is going to get a report by the end of the week, the beginning of next week, on David's cost estimate of what this is going to take to do, and also kind of lay out his plan of attack. And as we've already know that, the case that was ruled by the judge, that's kind of on pause until the government replies back to that. So, I don't think, I think as long as we can show a unified front, and show, not encourage protest rides and illegal activity to draw attention to this. I think the ways that Corva is going about it, I attended an event for them this weekend, and I felt that it was very positive. They got the information out, and I want to see more of that. And I would love to see all of these off-road groups get together. Obviously, I come from a motorcycle racing background and also dual sport, and this does not affect so much the off-road the off-road side of AMA District 37 yet, but it definitely affects off the dual sport side. So we are here as AMA District 37 to help all of these groups.
Thank you for that, Jerry. You may have been addressing that to me. And I guess my other concern with the ranking, or what could be represented as the ranking on that deck, is if OHV were listed as number 1 or 2, this would be a much different conversation, I'm afraid. So I appreciate that. The gentleman that followed my comments said probably the most valuable thing that the OHV at large can provide, which continue to espouse the leave no trace philosophy. But I definitely support all discussion. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, no problem. And again, Chris, I meant no disrespect by not calling you by name. I didn't notice your name at that time, so I apologize.
No problem. I was fixated on yours too, so I could remember who to address. Thanks.
Yeah. So, I think the more we can work together as a group, the better off we're going to be. And I will, when we talk to David next, I will make note to ask him about that.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, Chris, truly, for your comments as well, because ultimately the whole purpose of bringing people together across many different vantage points is so that we achieve greater accuracy, and truth is what rises to the surface. OHV is a centrifugal point of our discussion tonight because we are a collection of OHV enthusiasts and other public land access advocates. And this court ruling was directly targeted towards closures purporting that OHV is the top cause of desert tortoise mortality and decline, where we're seeing consistently across many sources of the scientific review that is not the case. And so, again, I'm not trying to place these trends that I attached numbers to and showing the ranking of where those trends lie in the research that we have available now. I'm not purporting to state that as the science, as the black and white fact. There's a lot more that we have to learn. And what we do know, though, is that there is an extremity to the court order where closing 2,200 miles of routes and locking up 1 million acres of public land to public access, because essentially in the desert ecology, humans cannot traverse over 1 million acres on foot, on horseback, on bike, without risking their own livelihood and health. And so it's preposterous to think that anybody, for any purpose of the multiple uses in that region, we'll be able to continue enjoying them and accessing this region of public lands without motorized access there. And so motorized access is the central point because of the court order that implicated motorized access as the cause of desert tortoise mortality. So I really love challenging discussions like this. I like it when we have a meeting of the minds where we're butting heads and, maybe we see things from different vantage points that feel like conflict. It's through that conflict that we're able to create greater understanding across our groups, work together more effectively. I really love that you keep hounding on that, Katie. That is important. Our ability to work together is ultimately what will lead us towards success for everybody involved. And so if we're not willing to ask the hard questions and dive in and talk about the hard questions, then all of us lose. So, Chris, I'm not sure what organization you're with, but I do look forward to chatting with you more. And Jerry, for context, this is a call that includes Cal4 members, as well as some groups that are part of the Ecologic Coalition, as well as many who are not, and just folks from the public who are also interested in access and stewardship of our public lands. So this is recorded and, will be shared with Cal4 members who are also interested in access and stewardship, and we'll be continuing the conversation in this and other forums related to both our legal and our practical and our administrative actions towards seeing accuracy emerge from this court ruling. So, Dirk, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, that now I understand a little bit more about also by that ranking, just it's important that now I understand how much camping and the food waste, restaurants, all that kind of stuff contributes. Something that we can do on our part is to help this clean up. When we see trash out in the desert, or that kind of thing. So, I'm not a lawyer. I can't help on the legal front, but it's really about protecting the tortoise, and I didn't realize how much we can affect, or I want to see how we can affect the raven population to improve on that, to reduce their population somehow.
Yeah, thanks, Dirk. I mean, that's really kind of the point of our project is working with folks on things like that. And that's why me and my colleagues and I have enjoyed working with Cal4Wheel, because I know as a group, the members do follow this ethos of leave no trace. And so the idea of working with groups that are spreading similar messaging is, being able to provide a little bit more context, like the waste management and the Raven. And then hopefully having you all help to create this kind of greater culture of the leave no trace, the similar ethics that we're all, striving for. And so, yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, and thank you, Dirk. Again, I see that we've had just a little bit of tension emerge in our call tonight, and ultimately, I really do think that's good. I think that tension has been there quite thickly for many, many years, and so it's part of what needs to rise to the surface so that we can more effectively achieve the balance that we're all trying to get to, so that we can all enjoy our public lands, especially in WeMo. Jim, you have something.
Got my microphone on finally.
Okay.
Well, I had a couple of points, and I was just scouring my not so smart phone to ask about leave no trace and its origins, because for many years that term was associated strictly with wilderness activities, and I'm a little concerned that leave no trace in this context might be interpreted differently by each side. I know that there are people on our side that won't use the term because it basically says you can't camp in the old leave no trace. You can't wear bright colored clothing outside. You can't pitch a bright colored tent. You shouldn't camp in groups of more than 2 to 3. All of the things that we do regularly were absolutely frowned on by leave no trace. And when the BLM finally was like, well, why doesn't the OHV community embrace this? They asked us to do a actual video about it, and we went to participate in that. And it was basically the only reason you should be here with a motorized vehicle is to support hikers. And so, but on the other side, if we say leave no trace, does that mean that that's where we intend and what we think is the better way to manage public lands? And so I'm just leery. We have always been about pack it in, pack it out, take home what you brought, et cetera, et cetera. But not to say that it shouldn't happen now, but just looking at the Wikipedia or any of the other, or BLM site, it's all about how they had to change their nomenclature. But for old folks like me, that's not a good point. Anyway, that just rolled through. The fragmentation of habitat is what completely misses my mark. What was out there before, Edwards Air Force Base or any of the other things were a lot of animal crossings, grazing animals, animals used for hire, prospectors. How did we get to a wild horse and burro population? All of those used set routes. And the old idea of going cow trailing on a motorcycle was that you followed that because the cows could figure out how to get there. And so I'm still wondering how fragmentation, and now that we've basically eliminated grazing and we're trying to take all large mammals off of the desert that don't have a billion-year history of being there, I'm wondering how that is going to or has impacted not only the disease, but the water availability, because as it was alluded to earlier, these are not drinkers. I remember years ago, people said, well, when the guzzler craze was going on, well, just put guzzlers out to go over and drink out of them. Well, that's not how they get liquid. So just a little concerned that fragmentation. 20 years ago, we were talking about behind the city of Mojave. They did not want even a single track motorcycle route across that because it would endanger the view shed and endanger the connectivity. And the next thing you know, it has windmills and 60-foot wide roads. And so somewhere in here, and I'm not complaining, I'm just trying to put some reality to where we're coming from. And as a person who actually physically went out and ran many of these roads for the WEMO survey work, the survey work over in Nevada, we did the Snipla project around there. This group actively hunted for tortoise on trails, off trails. We had to note them in the computer. The low numbers of those that we saw, and I don't think we ever found a tortoise shell other than alongside an older route where those people hauled their own water, the 20 mule team route and so on. They brought all their own artificial water with them, fed livestock with it, hauled freight, put a huge impact in the desert. The tortoise, that for them, that was their smorgasbord. So the original listing, and I know I'm rambling, but the original listing of this thing was to try to build a fenced sanctuary, whatever you want to call it, to keep cattle out, not to keep tortoises in. And the same thing happened down at Glamis, where the Glamis Gold, we always thought it was to keep the tortoise in. Now it was to keep the other parts out. And so I'd like to go back to that and see where Katie is thinking or what their position is on the original listing. Was it actually for fragmentation, vehicle use, overpopulation, large animal encroachment? What was the basis of the original listing?
Yeah. Just to touch on your first point, with the leave no trace, I think I only said that because I heard it in here, but that's not actually the language I've been using when I've been out talking to folks. And I can certainly understand some concern with the connotations behind that. So just wanted to clarify. that our messaging has been focused on those specific calls to action that I shared, and has not been a Leave No Trace campaign. As to, I mean, the habitat fragmentation, again, is from many things. It's from I-15 running through the middle of the Mojave Desert. It's from the communities that are springing up in different places. Like, that's again not pointing fingers at everyone. Humanity is like, causing fragmentation. And so, um, I think, when we say fragmentation, it's not, or at least when I do, I don't mean that specifically directed at like the OHV community as the cause of that fragmentation. It's the expanse of all people in general and how we're all trying to figure out how to live in this fragile ecosystem together. With in terms of the the original listing, did you mean like when the tortoise was listed as threatened on the Endangered Species Act?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, again, I am not in the world of policy or law or lobbying or anything like that. So I don't want to misspeak about the what the causes were listed then. From my understanding, I think it's based on um I'm not sure if it is with the Endangered Species Act as well. I know with IUCN, with their ratings of endangered and whatnot, it's based on like a percentage of decline over a certain period of time. And so um, those are like those numbers are kind of what push it into whichever category it falls into. Again, at least with IUCN. But yeah, I don't want to overstep and speak on the Endangered Species Act ruling, because yeah, policy is not my area of expertise.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. The fragmentation argument has been for as long as I've been in the desert tortoise talking points back from the 80s and 90s has been that fragmentation means that any place a tortoise has to walk across anything that isn't native soil, it's fragmentation. So then if they can't cross a single track motorcycle trail, how could they cross a state highway or a driveway? Or these are things that, I mean, the court has made an evaluation that the cause or the continued decline is from fragmentation by having too many routes, by not minimizing the route structure that's there. And I'm just trying to find out where that lies with you.
I mean, me personally, like I was saying, I don't think eliminating all of the OHV routes is going to solve fragmentation, nor do I think that should be the route that is taken by any means. Um, like I said, there's a lot of other causes to fragmentation that have absolutely nothing to do with OHV use and are most definitely not going to be eliminated, like the major highways that we've got running through. As Rose said, there's a lot of road mortalities as well. There's efforts to combat that with all the tortoise fencing that they've been putting up, particularly in the critical habitat unit region. Um, and so, all of it is trying to figure out how do we balance this. And my personal belief, the Living Desert stance is not to eliminate all OHV routes. I think that causes a lot of animosity between different groups. I don't think it's productive. Um, and so, yeah, I'm not sure if the court was splitting hairs to define habitat fragmentation as such of like a single OHV trail. And I think that's, I don't know, a bit short-sighted if that's the case and that's what they were using.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for for discussing some of the concerns that Jim brought up. And Jim, I've also used the term leave no trace because
Oh, yeah.
in all of my outdoor recreation activity, that's just what I strive for conceptually, but my conceptual perspective is a little different from the extremity that you described. I don't think leave no trace means that humans can't or shouldn't go into these spaces. I think that we can do so responsibly. And if we're riding in an OHV vehicle, then we leave nothing but tracks. If you're walking on foot, you leave nothing but footprints. If you're riding a horse, you leave nothing but hoof prints. Whatever it is, you leave it better than you found it. And that's something I really value about Cal4 is that we not only preach but practice that stewardship and conservation ethic. And so, in relationship to the desert tortoise, there's a lot of complexity to this discussion. We're not going to get through it all in a 1 hour call. We'll have many, many more discussions to this end because we do have a long path ahead of us in sorting through the impacts of this court ruling. And again, I just want to emphasize that this court ruling, the reason we talk about, hammer so hard on the role of OHV recreation in its impact on desert mortality or desert tortoise mortality is because that's what the court ruling alleges. And so that's part of what has to be sorted out as we're looking at all the various options and pathways that we have to restore access and have that balance in conservation and use of these public lands continue. So with that being said, since we are at the end of our hour together, and I appreciate everybody's time, we can certainly carry on our conversation, but I wanted to touch on a few things that are looking forward in what can we do. And so give me a moment just to share my screen. I have some things that we can all get involved in easily. One is, of course, support desert tortoise conservation. And so we've heard some key strategies from Katie tonight. Katie has been so awesome at being accessible and really highly engaged with us. And so I know as we have continuing questions, or maybe there's other ways that we want to get involved, that there may be opportunities through our connections with you, Katie, through the Living Desert Zoo and through, affiliations in the conservation community. But we've always been conservationists at heart and in practice, and that's not going to change because of this court ruling. There is no pitting of parties against each other. We need to get these things sorted out so that we can move forward more effectively in all pathways. Second, one of the big things that we can do is to respect the law. The real detrimental and tragic effect of this court order is that there were 2,200 miles of routes closed, and that is a legal closure. And we do not want to be carrying forward with any practices that violate that order, because then we're placing ourselves in violation of the law. So we do not advocate for that through Cal4. I know for all the other groups that are part of the ecologic partnership that Jerry mentioned, we collectively advocate for abiding by the law as we go through the steps that are necessary to get this resolved. We will always move forward based on facts and real science, and that's how we'll win. Another thing that you can do is vital, and that is to support the communities that are directly impacted by the closure. We did have Corva led an amazing event, and I know Mike's on this call. Thank you, Mike, for you and everyone in your group that put that together. But the towns of Randsburg, Johannesburg, and other communities that are immediately within and adjacent to the footprint of this closure, they're going to suffer because they rely on recreational tourism. And now we have a massive swath of banned access to the areas that they support through their businesses, through their livelihood. So we need to continue supporting them. I urge everybody to continue going to Randsburg, Johannesburg, Calico, all these communities, and spend your dollars. Get some of your recreational time spent there. Visit the restaurants. Use your hospitality time there. And when we have activities and events, please come out to support. Corva's holding another event on March 28th to bring everybody together. And as this very complex issue is evolving, we'll have, potentially more information and more action items that folks can get involved in at that time. But I really encourage everybody to go and take part. And there'll be more events like this as we move forward. We might not be able to get there on our OHV vehicles, but you can still get there in your street legal vehicles as the county roads remain open. So I'm sure you'll see lots of this spread about the various events through social media, through email, through all of our groups. A few of those are on the call tonight, but we will have some more, public statements and recommendations and ways to get involved coming out from this coalition of groups that now is crossing over not only OHV, but we have groups from the Rockhound community, miners, other folks who frequent this area who are also now banned from access because of the closure of routes, who are joining in, as we all have interest in keeping this area open. And then lastly, there are some very practical things that you can do to join in and be a voice for resolution. And so a few of those actions are shown here. Let me see if I can navigate the chat. I can. So, I have let me quick get this uploaded. Okay. I'm gonna have to stop sharing and keep talking while I bring that back up to share. But we have 3 different groups that have put together some really great campaigns to raise our voice to those who need to hear it most. And so one of those is through Cal4. We are launching an email campaign that targets there we go, that targets the Department of the Interior, as well as the Bureau of Land Management and the congressional and Senate reps that are immediately affected by their district's overlap with this area. So that's Congressman Obernolte and Congressman Fong, along with Senator Schiff and Senator Padilla, since they both represent the entire state of California. So this letter or email campaign pulls together many of the elements that we talked about tonight, gives you an opportunity to add your own voice into an easy to use letter template with all the email addresses included, so that you can just copy and paste those addresses into your email, select from which elements of the dialogue feel most resonant for you, add in whatever is highly relevant for you in how you're impacted, how your community is impacted by this mass closure, and then send that off, because we need to have all of the critical ears that are either decision makers or influencers of decision makers paying attention to this, as it is complex and while it's slow moving, it's also rapidly moving. We don't have an opportunity just to sit back and be passive with this court order. We really need to be taking action now. So this email campaign will get some very critical information into the hands of those who need to address an appeal that needs to happen for the court order, as well as a review of the science that was used to substantiate this court order. And that's what this email is targeted at. We also have a really great campaign that's been put together by Blue Ribbon Coalition. And thank you, Nick Pucci, who's on this call. You're part of that. Blue Ribbon's Action Alert targets an email campaign that goes to Trump, as well as judicial leaders who have influence over the ruling side of this particular case, as well as your local Senate and congressional representative. It will be routed to whoever is the appropriate representative based on your residential address. So you don't have to worry about looking up that information. It's also an easy, quick and click campaign. So really encourage folks to take part in that, as it hits a different audience with some slightly different and very important information that they also need to hear as either decision makers or direct influencers of decision makers. Third, we have a change.org petition that was put together by Misty Shea of Corva and Mike from Corva. Thanks to those who put this together. This change.org petition goes to Trump, as well as Senators Padilla and Schiff. And so it also has information that is a little bit different from the others, but very critical. And so I want to share all 3 of these campaigns, because ultimately these organizations, as well as many others that may not have a voice in this particular meeting tonight, but you'll see their voices as we're all working together earnestly. these three campaigns are all targeting against some different areas where the critical messaging needs to be received and acted upon. So there's QR codes for Blue Ribbon, as well as for the change.org petition. And then our email campaign through Cal4 is not yet up on our website. It will be soon, so I don't have a QR code for that. But for those within Cal4, you'll be receiving email outreach and also be able to get updates through all of our social media channels in the next forthcoming days. So I really hope that you'll all take part in all three of these outreach campaigns. And then as you are, on the ground and engaged in supporting these events, these communities, in recreating responsibly in other areas where we can go, in talking with your local regional representatives of the Bureau of Land Management, reaching out to your local representatives perhaps through other channels. If you're in Obernolte district or Fawn district, you can go to their offices. You can call them on the phone. There's lots of ways that we can engage with the decision makers and the influencers of decision makers. And so as you're doing that, if you see new concerns arise or things that we need to be discussing, I just invite you to come back and share that. We need to keep this very complex issue moving along in a seamless way, and are working together and communicating heavily and frequently with one another is what's going to make that happen. So I have huge gratitude for all the groups that have come together to really be a force to reckon with in trying to see this resolved in legal and practical way that restores our access and continues that great balance of conservation and use that we've enjoyed through all these years in West Mojave. So that wraps up our call formally tonight. If folks have some other burning questions, we can stick around for a few more minutes. But otherwise, I thank you all for joining and look forward to chatting with you much more as this continues to evolve.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Katie, for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Yeah, thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks for having me. And I hope to continue the conversation with many of you and hope to find better ways moving forward.
Yeah, we'll see
Katie,
you
I got to echo that because Rose, before I got on the call here and earlier today, Katie gave me a tour at the Living Dead around and saw the turtle habitats and what they're doing there, and tried to have open conversations how we can both collaborate. So, you know, that was really nice. Thank you, Katie, for the tour. By the way, Dave, ASA. We got a chance to finally, be able to see what they do down there and their passion for what they do. So I do know that they do want to work and try to work and learn with us as we're going through this fight.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.